finally hit that point where I just was tired. I was tired of living the life I was living. I was tired of feeling hollow, tired of feeling empty, and tired of just being depressed and not wanting to live anymore. My name is Dillon Thomas, and this is my story. Pretty much started really young, like at birth. In the hospital, my dad, I guess, saw that I had red hair and told my mom that I wasn't his kid and she must have been doing something just because I had red hair. So he left the hospital right then and there. And my parents, their marriage and stuff before I was born, my dad was an alcoholic and a drug addict. So he was really abusive and stuff like that. And at about 3 weeks, my parents had separated, and later on they'd get divorced. It's probably a little bit around whenever I was a year old, they got divorced officially. But when I was like 9 months old, I guess my dad kidnapped me at gunpoint from my mom. He came and was trying to get me and my brother, but he had just loaded me up at the car with a gun and took me to another state for a couple weeks or for an extended period of time, and no one knew where I was. And he finally got back in contact with my mom to set up a meet to drop me off. So that was kind of how it started right from the beginning of my life. And when I'd go to my dad's house, he would always put us in not great situations. I remember there was a few times he would just take us to a bunch of drug houses with a bunch of like drug addicts, and they'd be cutting up drugs in the other room. And we would just be sitting there, like told to be quiet and just stay in a room, basically. The part that was, I guess, even more difficult with that is we'd go to church the next day with my grandma in their church, and my dad would start talking and be an active member in the church on Sunday, but in drug houses on Saturday. And he finally would get arrested for having drugs on him and just living that lifestyle, and ended up going to jail. I was somewhere in middle school, I don't remember exactly, but my older stepbrother ended up, like, he was molesting me and my little stepbrother. Being molested by my stepbrother, it was a close family member, so it caused a lot of like confusing emotions and like feelings of like really low self-esteem and kind of like self-hate, because it felt like there was something wrong with me that I knew it was wrong, but didn't know what to do with that emotion and stuff. So I started kind of detaching and shoving my emotions down. Like really early on, I was just building up walls and distrust for people, because everyone that came into my life was leaving, and it felt like they were abandoning me and kind of betraying me, and not knowing what to do with those feelings or how to process them. I would just keep shoving it into that box and keep stacking it up and just detaching, and it came out as kind of just being a wild child. I'd just kind of act bad and act up and get into a bunch of trouble a lot just because I didn't know what else to do with myself. And yeah, that pretty much went through high school. And then in my junior year, I decided that I wanted to enlist in the military, because that was always a dream for me, was to just join the military, because I felt like it was really cool to be like G.I. Joe and fight for my country and feel like I would finally find a place that I belonged. I got pretty much zero support from my family. They thought it was a terrible idea. When I got into the Army through basic training and AIT, I did extremely well. And I finally felt like I had found the place I belonged, because I was good at shooting, good at hiking, good at running, and all the stuff they asked for us didn't seem really hard. It seemed like it's pretty easy and stuff that I excelled in. In my first unit, they were all older than me. I was 18 and they were all in their mid to late 20s and early 30s. So when I came in, they were always drinking and partying. So I started drinking with them, and it started out just casually, just kind of drinking, and there was never really a problem there, because shortly after we ended up getting orders and deploying to Afghanistan, probably within 4 months of me getting to my duty station. I guess the unit I was in, we didn't really do a whole lot of like running and gunning action stuff that you see in the movies and that you think you're gonna do. It was kind of more just security and patrolling around the bases and checking on the locals and doing raids on their stuff to make sure they didn't have any contraband on the base. When we came back, there was a miscommunication with my family, so I came back to nobody. So I felt like kind of betrayed and abandoned, because at the time I didn't know there was a miscommunication. I just thought they didn't show up. So yeah, it was a hard blow to take, because it felt like basically it confirmed that feeling of abandonment, and I was alone and no one really cared. Like living alone, I kind of started drinking more, and it went from casual drinking to just drinking for something to do, because I was alone. So I would just kind of drink and hang out and play games by myself, and I would start drinking a lot, more and more every night, because I realized that it worked in the sense of numbing the feelings that I had of the feeling of abandonment and not living up to expectations and just kind of always falling short, and being alone, it numbed a lot of those feelings, but it was only temporary. So whenever I went back after that leave, I kept drinking more and more and more to further separate myself from those feelings, because just throughout all of life just kept feeling like a failure and like alone and abandoned. Eventually one night I was drinking to the point where I just got extremely depressed and felt like I didn't want to live, because I just felt like such a failure, and like that I was just a fraud, and that no one was with me and no one cared about me, and that I was completely alone. And I was in this room by myself, and it was just middle of the night, no one was there, and no one was ever there. But I had bought a gun from somebody, and I had it in my drawer at the time. And I remember grabbing it and like having it loaded, and I put it up to my head, just had that thought of not necessarily that I wanted to die, but I just didn't want to live. Like, kind of didn't see the point in living if I was going to be alone and no one was ever going to be there for me. What was the point of life? Didn't seem like there was any real reason to be alive. And so I had the gun in my head and the finger on the trigger, and at the time I didn't know, but it was definitely God intervention. I just kept picturing my family and my mom crying when they found out that I was dead and that I had shot myself. And after I had put the gun away too, I had the feeling like something inside of me had died, like something was missing, that there was just like a void in my life. I had some friends that were, that I had met at going to a church, because my parents came down and they had found a church for me to go to when I first got down there, and I made a connection with some people there. So going to church with them, I finally had a little bit of a come to Jesus moment where I broke down and I went to the altar and gave my life to God, kind of, I guess you could say, because I would take it serious, but only on Sundays in the middle of the church. But then as soon as we left, nothing would actually change. And around that time as well, the unit I was in merged with another unit, so we had gotten new people. So we started to party a lot, and once I started hanging out with that group of people and partying a lot more, completely threw all the God stuff back out the window. I was drinking close to like a fifth of liquor every night, and just kind of raging and partying with all these people. And I would go from just having fun to like wanting to hurt people, because all those emotions would come up. I would always cause a lot of trouble, but it was always after hours. So I was a great soldier during the day, and during work hours I was like excelled and did extremely well. But then after work hours I was always causing problems, and always with the group of people, it was either I was getting in trouble or the people that I was with were getting in trouble. And whenever we had returned, I had fulfilled my contract and I only had a couple months left in the Army. Whenever I came back to the States, I moved back in with my family, and I just kept drinking and like didn't really think too much of it. It just became a habit. I was of age and just didn't think much of it. I started getting like really lonely, because I would just go to work, come home, and as soon as I got home, I would just start drinking until I would like pass out and go to sleep. Like I was drinking so much to the point where I started throwing up blood almost every day. I finally got like lonely enough to where I wanted to go have human interaction, so I got in my car, and my parents were gone again this weekend, and I drove out to a bar. So I was showing these guys a gun I had at the bar, and we were kind of messing around with it, and I remember a guy had cocked it, and it was a revolver, and he cocked the hammer back and he put it to my head, and it was pretty much touching my head, and he was like, and his finger was on the trigger, and he's like, what would happen if I pulled the trigger? And there was bullets loaded in it, and I told him, I was like, I would probably die, like, since, you know, it's loaded, because it didn't really faze me because I had been drinking and was still pretty depressed and didn't care if I lived or died. And after seeing that, the bartender had called the police, and they ended up coming out and like arresting me, and I had a pretty dark sense of humor, and it didn't turn out to be funny. And I asked the cop if he could just take his gun out and shoot me in the face, because I told him, like, well, it'd make this whole process a lot faster if you just did that instead of putting all the paperwork in. And they don't take that as a joke. They take it pretty serious. So they put me on suicide watch. So they take everything from you, like you don't have boxers or socks or anything, and they give you like a padded, pretty much dress that you get to wear that has Velcro, and like that's about all you have. And I finally hit that point where I just was tired. I was tired of living the life I was living. I was tired of feeling hollow, and tired of feeling empty, and tired of just being depressed and not wanting to live anymore. So I had remembered growing up in church and stuff that like kind of like just God, there, like that God was there all the time. And remember like putting aside my pride and everything, and just like, I don't care if I'm in jail and I'm with all these tough guys, I'm not gonna try to be a tough guy anymore. Like, and I broke down and just started crying and was like, God, I'm tired of living like this, and I need you. And I don't know how or what's gonna go down, but I know that I need you. I felt this peace come over me. I felt like everything was gonna be okay, which the situation didn't make any sense because I was locked in jail. They had processed me through the jail. I was in the county jail in suicide watch. And then I remember kind of just sitting up, walking around, looking around, and one of the guards looked up at me, and I think I'd been there for a night or two, and she just looked up and was like, you don't belong here. She brought me out and let me use their phone, and like gave me a paper that had all the different bail bondsmen on it. And I remember when they finally got everything going to release me, they took me and they just took me to the hospital and made sure that I was clear and got cleared off like suicide watch to make sure I wasn't going to do anything crazy. And after that cleared, I remember them just being like, all right, you're good to go. And it was like midnight or 1 a.m. The next day, they took me and they brought me here to PCC, and we went and had a meeting with Pastor Steve. And I remember just talking with him and praying with him, and like actually surrendering my life to God this time, not just kind of doing it because I needed a favor, but actually truly and fully committing my life to God. And that very next day, I quit everything cold turkey, and I was drinking close to a fifth of liquor every single night, smoking like 5 or 6 cigarettes every day, and then like chewing a can of chew every day for 5 or 6 years straight. And all of that was able to stop all at the same time, cold turkey with no cravings, because God. And the restoration and hope that he brought in every single thing. I have not regretted a single night of reading my Bible or going to church. I'm like, all the nights of full of regret of not wanting to go hang out, I'm like, with God, there's never been a day, a minute, a moment that I've ever regretted with God. The enemy took a lot from me, but God restored more than I could ever imagine. I feel like I have a full heart now. I have good relationships with my family. I know I have a church family and church friends, and I ended up meeting my wife here at church, so now I'm married and found out going to be a dad. So I'm super excited about that, and it's all because God. Like there's nothing I could have done or anyone else could have done for me to change or make that change. It was only God. God is the only one who is strong enough to break through all of that hardness and pull me out from that complete darkness. If you're praying for someone, keep praying, because it's not about what you can do, it's about what God can do, and He's bigger than everything. So just keep praying. If you don't think there's hope, there's God, and God's always stronger than everything. And He wins in the end, and I just have to give glory to God for everything He did, because I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be alive, and I wouldn't be the man I am today without Him and without His mercy and glory.